Let's get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Today on the Prenup Podcast with Natassia Miller, intimacy coach and sexologist. So today we have Natassia on the pod, which is a bit different than what we've done historically, which I'm actually more excited to break out into beyond people that have gone just through divorces, people who are actively in pursuit of a prenup, or financial planners. Tell us what you do.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me, Lily. I'm a sexologist.
Yes, let me just clarify, guys. She is a sexologist. Did you know this existed? Because I didn't until probably a year and a half ago, and I'm obsessed.
Yeah, I mean, the whole field is about studying human sexuality, and there are researchers and therapists and coaches and educators. So it's an umbrella term for, whatever you do within that realm. And formally, I'm a coach and an educator. And it's quite recent because I used to work in finance. So I do have some insights on the financial planning and how that can impact your sex life. But it was something that I think has been a long time coming for me because I have always loved talking about sex and I've always been really interested in people's experiences and how taboo it is, but how universal it is at the same time. And so I was really unhappy when I was in finance and thinking about what the next step would be and what I really wanted to leave as my legacy. I never thought that I'd actually work with something I really enjoyed. And so it feels very lucky for me to have come across this work and found myself in it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about your childhood. Where did you grow up? Parents married, divorced? What was all that like?
So I grew up in Brazil. And then when I was 10, I moved to Florida. My mom worked in finance and she talked a lot about sex very openly. When I was very young, like let's say 7 years old, she just taught me more about like what my anatomy was. And I asked her how kids were made, and she gave me this really cute book that explained it. It was a children's book. So I think I had that insight about sex very early on that probably a lot of parents just don't have that conversation at all with their kids. And she created this really healthy dialogue between us where, as I grew older and had questions, I always felt safe reaching out to her. I would say that she never really focused on the pleasure aspect of it, but curiosities and whatnot, she would share what she knew. She's not an expert, but she had a lot more. Yes, she was open, and I think I have to really thank her for that.
I love that.
Yeah, my parents were together and then they ended up separating when I was 13. So they never formally got married. My mom had been married before him and then she got married again after him. No prenups involved. But money was always an issue because my mom made more than my dad. And so that imbalance created a lot of tension at home, even though there wasn't any, we were fine financially. And so that I found that always to be very interesting because my mom came from this position of like female empowerment and growing at work and, being financially stable and independent, but then also adhering to these traditional gender norms. And I I see that over and over again today still. And I think that even though we want to empower ourselves, and I think that's so important, there is a bit of the hypocrisy of us still expecting the man to provide equally, if not more. And,
Power
it's in our
dynamic.
subconscious and it is the power dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so your parents split up, your mom gets remarried, you move to Miami, more time in Miami than Brazil, or kind of back
It
and
was
forth?
split. It was split.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you went to school in the States?
Yeah. Colombia.
Columbia.
Yeah.
Okay. And tell me, how was that? How was finally like coming to the States, kind of setting into your like next chapter?
Like New York is wild for anybody who's 18. Like if you did not grow up here, it is
I can't
it's a
imagine being in college here.
playground and it's so intense. And at the same time, Colombia was very academically demanding. And so you're just trying to balance the novelty with the weight of it all. And I had a really great first 2 years and then I got really tired of the city.
Hmm.
And I ended up going to Paris to study abroad, which was amazing. I loved it.
Oh
Uh,
my gosh.
Fell in love there with a French man and decided to stay for the whole year. It was just going to be a semester.
Really?
Yes. I think the French taught me a lot about sensuality, and
Just how old were you when that
I was 20.
okay.
Yeah.
Tell me more about your time in Paris.
I was at a moment of healing because went through the first time I went through depression and bulimia, like during college. And my dream had always been to come to New York. I mean, I had already been to New York prior, but I was just so enthralled with the idea of it. And I think it made me really sad that I wasn't like having the absolute best time of my life, like all
That can
throughout
be so
college.
applied though to so many other things, right? Is this like idea and expectation of what you think it should be and then the
Yeah.
reality of what it is.
Yeah. So it was very healing. Like you can see that they have such a better quality of life. And I learned so much and I met so many interesting people and, fell in love and whatnot. But then I really felt like at the end I had closed that chapter in my life and I was ready to come back and, you know, graduate.
Okay. So you come back to New York and you immediately go into finance or how does that
Yeah. I immediately go into finance.
did you study it in undergrad? What was
No, I
the
studied political science.
okay.
Political science for me is such a broad
Catch all.
major.
I was a
Yeah.
government major,
Yeah,
environmental
exactly.
studies. Here
Yeah,
we are.
yeah. So I didn't feel like I was lacking, and I ended up going into the sales side. So it's
Okay.
not like I was deep in the weeds in the Excel spreadsheets. And it was fun in the beginning, but I think there's something about when you talk about your career. One of the best pieces of advice that I've ever gotten is like your 20s are basically for you to around and
Yeah.
like experiment a bunch of different things. And then your 30s are for you to really hone in on what you're good at, what you decide to focus on so that you can really make your money in your 40s and 50s and beyond. And so I remember panicking and thinking, oh man, I'm never going to find that. And also feeling like I was losing time working in finance and not really having much of a North Star. And realizing that the longer I was there for, you notice that the people who really became successful were the ones who loved what they were doing. They
Yeah.
they were really ruthless at the quality and the dedication and the excellence, and the ones that are there to just, you know, pop in and out and get their paycheck because they lack that passion, like you will become mid long term. And I was not brought up to be mid.
And then you'll just be stuck.
Yeah. So I ended up leaving when I was 29 and moved back to New York because I was working in finance in Brazil. I moved back to Brazil after. And I moved back to New York and started another wellness company. It was a movement company that we wanted to scale. But there was one interesting piece of information in all of this was that she's a dancer and she shared that she has 20 orgasms in an hour. And I just remember thinking, like, that is insane. Like, we should be teaching that, and respecting her privacy and everything. She didn't want to do that. So,
Yeah.
which I get. But it I don't know, it lightened something up in me. And then I read Dr. Emily Nagoski's book, Come As You Are, which is the Bible on a female desire and pleasure and arousal and really just normalizing how we experience sex and
Yeah.
sexuality because it's generally seen through the lens of men. And that's when I had the idea for Wonderlust, my sexual wellness company. And I wanted to help couples talk about sex because it's a really big obstacle to having a better sex life. And that's why I created the card deck you know, and it kind of went from there.
One of the things I love about what you're doing is you really are focused on like couples because there's so much. I know you do
Yeah.
this a lot with women, but couples in particular, I think it could be so siloed. You men only have one resource, which is, I mean, usually women at least talk to their friends. I feel like a lot more about sex, sexuality, etc. But I don't know if men have that type of community and or ability to converse in such a way, right?
Right.
With their friends. And so I love what you're doing, which is trying to open it up to everyone and say
Yeah.
it's not a you or you. It's actually a lot about being together,
Yeah.
but also at the same time, it's not on one person to provide for the other, right? It's very much like you need to understand your body, you need to understand
to,
your
yeah.
and then you can be better
Absolutely.
together. So let's kind of navigate. Okay. So you come back to New York. You are in a relationship or anything at that time in your life or
No, when I was in Brazil, I ended up marrying, but it didn't feel like a formal marriage because we didn't have a party, there wasn't a ring. It was actually we were moving in together, and in the Brazilian system, you can very quickly be considered a married couple,
Mhm.
and then that has a lot of financial implications. And so when we were moving in together, we signed a prenup that already inherently includes a civil marriage
Okay.
contract. So it was very transactional in that sense. I remember
Yes.
at the time feeling like it was precocious and not really aligned with what I wanted because I obviously I wanted to be proposed to,
Yes,
it felt
totally.
unromantic. But that really changed when we ended that relationship. It really changed my understanding of prenups because it just made it so clean. And frankly, it was really easy for us too, because like we didn't want anything from each other. So I think even if there wasn't anything there, but you, the worst can come out of people when you end a
Mhm.
relationship. So we were safeguarded in that sense, and it just made it really easy.
So when you split up, was there because now you're in this field of intimacy and helping couples engage, like, did
Yeah.
you feel at the time that that partner was someone that you could be totally, fully your true intimate self with? Or was this, throughout that you said, "Oh, in my next partnership, what I didn't get from here, I'm gonna make sure I get," or kind of how did you navigate your
Both,
learnings?
both. I think the really hard thing, like when you're talking about hooking up and you're like, the sex was insane, but the guy is so toxic,
Yep.
there is something to be said for that, like push and pull chemistry
Mhm.
that is very much chaotic. And so I had that with my ex where, we had this like insane sexual chemistry, but it was very unaligned relationship. And when we ended things, I just remember thinking like a lot of what I experienced so unhealthy is not what I want to experience in my next relationship
Mhm.
whenever that happens. He brought out the worst in me, and I think I brought out the worst in him. And I just remember thinking like I'm not a fighter, in relationships, I
Totally.
mean. And why is this coming out of me? There's this anger. And
Yeah.
it's just I don't like the person that I've become. And I think you really need to pay attention to how your partner impacts your nervous system. That is so true. And that's not to say that you'll never have conflict. Conflict is, normal. And I will say, I wish that we had worked with a couples therapist back then just to kind of have a better guidance because I think we suffered for too long on our own, but we were also so young.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that. Was there a pivotal moment that you said, "Hey, this is not working anymore," or was it a lot of small
It
things
was a
that
lot of small things. I
added
mean,
up?
we broke up like 3 times, and then the third time was like the last one.
How were you able to finally say, "Okay, this is it"?
You feel it. You're just like,
In your gut?
I don't like feeling this way anymore, and I don't like fighting with you all the time anymore. And it's really hard, but it was for the best. And so I remember looking for my next partner, like there were very specific qualities that I wanted in a partner.
Yes.
And today I've married again, and my husband is so chill, and it's funny because it's not that he never gets annoyed, but
We
he
all do.
or upset, but
Yeah.
when he is, I know how to calm him down, and when I am, he knows how to calm me down. And so that is a really interesting dynamic that I've never had before, and we've been together for 5 years, and knock on wood, but we've actually never had a fight.
Like a true, true fight.
Yeah, we've never had a fight.
What do you think
We've never
you can
yelled at
attribute
each
that?
other, like, at all,
Ever?
ever.
What do you think
I
attributes to that? Do you think maybe was he married before? Or
He
tell me
was
how
married before.
okay, so you
Yeah.
both came into this kind of, we had a
From
chapter,
Yeah.
didn't work. What do we want next time around?
Yeah, he didn't wanna get married initially because he was like, "I'm done with that,"
How long was he married
just
initially?
for a couple of years, but for him, it was just very, I guess, traumatic to be with someone that didn't give back in the way that
Yeah.
he's very generous. But his divorce was very clean too. They didn't want anything from each other. They didn't have a prenup, but
No kids.
no kids. And I think it's always a good sign, like when you talk to people about how their divorce happened and kind of understanding like their like how did they approach it, and when you know that someone was very respectful in
Mhm.
that very hurtful moment, I think it's such a green flag.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
So
Like, how can you act in one of the most challenging moments of your life,
yeah,
even if the other person is very challenging?
yeah, absolutely. And so I started Wanderlust after I was with him, and I have to say, like, not every man is okay with a woman talking about sex on the internet, you
Okay,
know?
so let's
So
let's
he's
so let's
he's
talk about
great.
this. So you Brazil, finance, get married, doesn't it's not working. You get divorced and you come back to New York, round 2 in New York.
Yeah.
You arrive in New York. Are you still in finance at that point, or have you decided already to start Wanderlust and you've come to New York to start it?
No, I came to New York to start my other
Yes. Okay,
wellness
got it.
company. Yeah. But I started from scratch. I have these moments of my life where I've really just it's like a phoenix, you know. I
I
like
love that.
burn it all to the ground and like rebuild it. And I had a reading with my shaman, and he's like, that's a very characteristic of you, but I'm fearless in that sense. Like I just really believe that things are going to work out. I'm
I mean,
pretty
you have to,
delusional.
right?
Yeah.
It's not delusional. It's true
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. And that's why it's worked out so far, what
Yeah.
you're doing. And it's amazing. So,
Yeah.
okay. So you come to New York, you start this company. It doesn't work the way you thought, but you do start getting more into your sexuality and starting talking more about sexual wellness and engaging. And did you meet your partner while you were already a public facing figure
No,
about
no,
sexual
no.
wellness, or did that come
No, that came after.
after?
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me how you guys met.
We met in COVID through friends in common.
Okay.
Yeah, it was in the beginning of COVID.
And you just clicked.
Yeah, we just clicked.
What were some of the first questions, or I would say conversational navigation, right? When you meet someone and you're trying to, I don't know if assess is the right word because I'm so sick of people going out
No.
and interviewing partners, but there's
Yeah.
something to be said about what are the green flags that you look for early on? What are some of the
I
things that you're
I
trying
break
to see
all the
out?
rules of dating. I talk about relationships on the first few dates, past relationships. I talk about sex, all the taboo things that people don't like to address.
Okay.
And I think it's for me, it's very telling how someone talks about their past relationships, the experiences that they had, how like why they're here today and what they want moving forward. Not like I'm explicitly asking like where do you see us,
Yeah.
but it very much is where are you in life?
Hmm.
And I think it's our past relationships have formed so much of who we are that I have a really hard time understanding the people who don't like to address that at all. I mean, I know couples that have
Imprints.
been together for years and they're like, I would never talk about our exes. Like it's not a thing. And I'm thinking like, how, what do you guys talk about?
Yeah. I have no idea.
So I talk about, and talking about sex early on is great because you discover what the other person likes and it leads to just much hotter sex. So
So, okay, let's transition into this. This is the real reason anyone is tuning in or wants to learn more. Okay. So you start getting into, you have your new company, et cetera. You're also coaching, right?
yes, I do coach couples.
So tell me kind of how you got into that, how you got certified, and how did you
Yeah.
get all that?
When I launched my company, I obviously needed to get traction on the internet and, for help with distribution and sales. And so I ended up going viral on TikTok educating about sex and realized that I really love this so much.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I see a future here as an educator and, a thought leader possibly. And so what is the next step? And that's when I decided to seek my certification. And I concluded it recently. It's been a year now, and it's been really, really nice to be working with, couples and helping them find themselves, find each other, resolve any conflicts. People come to me for sex, but at the end of the day, the problems are they're the like there are the emotional distressors, emotional disconnect. There's like not any touch involved in the relationship. There's resentment from other parts of their lives,
Mhm.
including the finances. So,
So let's talk about that a little bit.
yeah.
One of the things that I feel a lot of the people that I've talked to in the past year, 9 out of 10, there's been infidelity, but infidelity is never really the reason. It seems like it's the, straw that broke the camel's back type of situation. All these underlying things, and, there's always someone to blame, right? And somehow it always seems to come back to sex, but sex seems to be not necessarily the root of it all. And so I'm just so curious as to what you see on your side, right? Like, what are people coming to you with in terms of problems in their sex lives that impact the other areas, or is it the other way around? Like, are there other areas that are impacting sex, or is sex impacting the other areas? Is it kind of, it's all connected?
It's all connected, but it's generally whatever's happening outside of the bedroom that's impacting the bedroom. I have never met a couple that said that they're just simply bored. Like there's
Yeah,
always some other dynamic involved, right?
totally.
And so oftentimes, especially, with parents, the kids, there's so many different layers of how you're dividing the household chores and the mental load for the woman. And men have this very spontaneous way of relating to sex. They think about it, they want it, they execute. And women, I'm making generalizations, but this is how it tends to work. Women tend to be more responsive. They need more time to warm up and get in the mood, and they need more emotional connection and physical touch, and the context essentially needs to be right. But because we've been taught that spontaneous is better, which is not true, but it's very much in our
The
psyche.
media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a hard time working with our desire style, with our sexual template to really understand what it is that we need to get in the mood more easily, to turn on the ons and turn off the offs
Mm.
more quickly, so to speak. And people just don't have these conversations, and they never sit down to think about what it is that they want and why they want it and how that can change throughout different phases of life. And so when men show up, and obviously here I'm talking very much about heterosexual relationships,
Yes.
which is mainly the types of clients that I have. And he initiates and she says no. And then they kind of keep at this impasse.
Yes.
But also because the more conversations that I have with women, it's like, well, he didn't talk to me properly like all week or all day. And suddenly he's asking me for sex. Like, there is
What the hell does he think?
absolutely
Yeah.
yeah, there's no cultivation of that erotic connection that's going on. And like by erotic, I'm not talking about like you need to have the super sexy,
Yep.
life.
Yeah.
It is very much of, are you spending 5-10 minutes touching each other every day without the expectation for it to lead to sex? It's hugging, holding hands, caressing.
I've heard someone recently say that men give love to get sex,
Yeah.
and women give sex to get love.
Yeah.
And I sat there for a minute. I was like, I had never thought about it like that. And at first I got defensive about it. And then it, gave myself
Yeah.
a minute to really process it. And I was, holy, it's a big power dynamic play too, of like what
Yeah.
the needs are, kind of a build up versus a quick hit or whatever you might call it.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're seeing a lot with these couples of just,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But there's a lot of resentment that is coming in from outside of the bedroom. And so how do you, like, I need to work through their resentment with them
mm,
and patch that up before they're even in the mindset of working on what it is that you want to explore in bed and how do you want to connect sexually and all of the other things.
are majority of the couples that you're seeing, is it after marriage or is it before marriage or?
After marriage. Yeah, I mean, like 15 plus years together with kids,
Yeah.
generally in their 40s and 50s.
How do you, I mean, one thing I was talking to a friend about recently is she and her partner, they're not even engaged yet, but they go to couples therapy, and
Yeah.
she's really, she said for her it's like setting herself up for success in the future instead of getting into a situation where they feel like they need to go see a therapist or they need to go see a sexologist. How do you Do you think people come to you kind of at a moment of we're either going to be together or breaking? Or is it more of like we're in an uncomfortable spot? How do we get out of
Yeah.
this hole? Like we want to get out of this hole. We don't know how to communicate.
Yeah. No, people come to me when they're in the hole.
Yeah.
Yeah. You should probably go to a therapist if you are at the
Breaking
verge
point.
of breaking. Yeah, absolutely.
What are some things that couples can do early on in their marriage to kind of strengthen these bonds and also be able to, like, what are some effective communication styles when it comes to sex?
So we fall into routine very easily.
Hmm.
And if you are consistently talking about sex, it doesn't become this like big boogeyman. So you so if you get into the habit of like early on in the relationship, and it's never too late, right? Like
Yes.
even if you've been together for 20 years, if you never talk about it, you can sit down and you can say, listen, like our sex life is very important for us. It makes me feel connected to
Hmm.
you. And we haven't touched base on this for, I don't remember the last time or we never do it. And
Yes.
I think it would be great if we tried to change that. And I'd love to have like a very open, honest, constructive conversation. I'd love to know, like, how do you feel about our sex life? What do you want to experience more of?
Yeah, it's like,
What
how do you make your
hasn't been
partner
doing?
not feel attacked when you're like,
You need
our sex is mid or
totally,
sucks?
totally. But it also can be so freeing when you both admit that. So if you are consistently sharing, like, this was great, I really enjoyed this, and you're bringing it in with a positive light,
Hmm.
when you decide to bring in the negative, it doesn't feel like it's coming in from out of left field.
Yeah.
You are already, it's an inherent part of your dialogue as a couple. And so you look at it as a constructive piece of your relationship. And there are, in general, three characteristics that couples with lasting sexual connection share. One of them is that they're really good friends and they genuinely love each other. The second one is that they realize that they've been following, you know, society's model of how to operate and they decide to build their own way of operating. And the third one, which is relevant to what we're talking about right now,
Yeah.
is that they prioritize sex, but that they also admit to each other when you go through phases in life that are inevitable that sex is not priority, you will have an honest acknowledgement that right now this is in the back burner, but when this phase passes, we're going to work on finding each other again. Because the problem becomes when you don't acknowledge it, you have inevitably one partner that becomes resentful that sex isn't
Hmm.
happening at all. And then the other partner who's just really not in the mindset for it is also feeling resentful of that situation. And it creates a lot of shame, but there's also not an open and honest dialogue that's being had of this is why it's not working for me and I need you to give me space and right now is not the time and this is when we can come back and talk about how we can reconnect after.
Do you see a lot of it when, couples have kids that like the
Yes.
dynamic just completely changes and
Kids
it's
are so hard. I mean, it's obviously the most rewarding thing in a relationship. You're building, it's a long-term game. So I
yeah.
have so much respect for parents. But yes, I mean, we as a society weren't built to, frankly, have nuclear families and
Hmm.
have only two people take
Yeah.
care of their children. Originally we had full communities that would provide that help. And so the nuclear family structure is so recent. And I think that's
Isolating.
one of the reasons why parents are so exhausted
Yeah.
is because they just don't have that necessary support. And it really does change the dynamic. And I think when you're in that like early stage of the kids, like let's say, 0 to 10
Hmm.
years, it is very much the do no harm phase. Like you agree that you will not do any harm to each other because that's what you want to
Yeah.
mitigate, which has everything to do with a prenup as well,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
And when you have these agreements in place, they really work. But frankly, understanding your desire style and like what is the best way for you to initiate and what are the best scenarios that work for you and what are your boundaries and your absolute no's, it helps you to understand each other so much better so
Yeah.
that like, your husband doesn't come up and like tries to slap your ass and initiate sex while you're cleaning the dishes and that doesn't work for you.
Yes.
Like that's not a kink you have,
Yep.
and but you're probably not communicating that like this is a absolute hard like never when I am doing household
Do
chores,
not touch
do
me.
not initiate like because people want they want feedback. They
Yeah.
want to know how to navigate this.
How okay, so tying this back into kind of prenups, financial conversations before marriage, but other conversations. I think one of the biggest things I've learned this past year with research is the finances are important, but there's so many layers beyond the finances, right?
Yeah.
To your point, like what are the things before someone gets married that you would say, here's some questions around sex that you should ask and or topics of conversation that you should cover? Is there anything that really jumps out to you?
I think it's very much expectation of like how, how often you want to have
Mhm.
it. And when that doesn't happen, like, how are we going to navigate this? Because I see this so common, with couples that there is an expectation. And I don't believe that quantity matters, but it will impact couples once it becomes like a monthly, bi-monthly, or even
Yeah.
less regularly. And so if you have that agreement, like understanding
Mhm.
what are your expectations in terms of your sex life, are there any things that you've been wanting to explore and any fantasies that you have that because I think the really hard thing is sexuality is something that's ever evolving and we
Change
discover
throughout your
things
year.
about ourselves, and Esther Pearl says this. She's been married for 30 years, I believe, and she's in her third marriage with her husband. And she says, like, you can be married three times to three different people, or you can be married three times to the same person. You will rebuild your marriage over time. So the hard part about having conversations about sexuality in early on is that
Mhm.
you two are going to change so much,
Totally.
but it really is about like, what are your expectations? What are your interests? What are you curious to explore? Because, if you have a partner who's like, I actually only enjoy having sex wearing latex and, like a whole latex suit, for example, that's their kink.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't ever see myself, but you love that person and you
Yeah.
want to make it work. And it's like, well, in what situations are you going to be able to explore that? And like,
Yeah.
how are we going to reach an agreement where maybe you're going to go to a dungeon and you're going
Yeah.
to be working with a Dom or, whatever it
Yeah.
is, the agreement that you have. I think these are the hard conversations that, I think can be so freeing and so liberating when you recognize that everybody has
Their thing.
their thing or something that like sparks their interest and very much of what feeds a really good sex life is I mean honestly the simple things of and I say this all the time but like
Yeah.
stop going to the same restaurants or the dinner and a movie kind of dates like actively look for new activities in town. Plan your dates around that. You'll see each other in a new light. That breathes so much new energy into the relationship, and that will impact how you show up in bed because you're like, "Oh, interesting. Like I just learned something new about you and we learned it together." And you know,
Experiences, new
new
experiences instead of the
experiences,
same old, same old.
new experiences. It is about sitting and listening to each other genuinely. It's about whatever it is that you committed to showing up and
Yes.
executing it. It's about the non-sexual touch and feeling safe with each other like and then finding your play in it. Like do you enjoy sexting? Do you enjoy sending nudes? Do you enjoy dirty talking? Do you enjoy, getting handcuffed and
Yeah.
whatever it is, but like how can you look at that intimate time together with your partner as play and not as this like super heavy thing on the to-do list?
Mhm.
How can you make it for yourself?
Instead of it being an obligation, it's more of like a
Yeah.
shared moment.
That's the number one thing that I really want to teach women is that they very much can approach it from a I'm doing it for the other because we've been socialized to approach sex that way. And it's like, no, like when you come at it for yourself,
Yeah.
it is so empowering and it shifts your whole mindset.
What are some things, especially for women? I definitely some of the women that I've talked to in the past years who've gone through divorces and men, it seems like a lot of the other outside pieces of the puzzle end up in the bedroom as the stressor,
Yeah.
right? To your point of like, okay, financially, one person ends up super burdened with the finances. You get married as a dual income couple, and then all
Yeah.
of a sudden you have two kids, and then one person decides to leave their job. And being a stay at home mom is a job itself, but all of a sudden you've lost that income, right? And so
Right.
you're living this lifestyle, and one person is whether it's the husband or the wife. I just went out with a gentleman who is divorced with two kids, and he did the stay at home dad thing. He took
Yeah.
a backseat in his career. Supported his wife in her ambitions. And then it was interesting because what had happened with a lot of other men, right, who had stayed at home, it seemed like whoever stayed at home with the children ended up bearing a lot of the brunt of just the emotional work of the family.
Hmm.
And it seems like whichever partner stayed at work or continued had the financial brunt of the family. And it
Yeah.
creates this like divide.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, there's a power dynamic shift, which we kind of talked about earlier, but I want to get more into that of, oh, well, I'm not getting X from my partner, so I'm going to get Y, or I'm going to get X from
Yeah.
somewhere else or something else. And it can be in both cases, right? Because both people are kind of in these silos
Yeah.
of life all of a sudden. Like, how do you help couples, I guess, recognize what's happening around on the outside, but still stay together on the inside? Or is that even the right terminology? I don't know. I don't know what it is, right? Is like, how do you not avoid the show that's outside of your orbit,
Right.
but how do you still stay intimate and connected when everything else around you is consuming all your energy?
It is so much about communication. Like I don't want to be harping on the same thing over and over again,
Too,
but
though.
but having strong communication skills really helps. One tip that I give is from nonviolent communication, instead of telling each other like you did this wrong
Yep.
and it becomes this argument about who's right, you should share when you do that, it makes me feel because nobody can argue against your feelings. Like your feelings are real.
Yes.
And when you tell somebody how their action made you feel, it brings their guard down. Then
Hmm.
you're able to listen to each other because it becomes about the feelings. And that's what impacts ego.
Yes.
So I think it really is about learning how to listen, you know, having really, really great understandings of how you want to operate with each other and making these fine-tune adjustments along the way, because if you have that going, like the rest is just fine tuning. It
Yes.
really is. I have clients who have weekly relationship check-ins, and they go through everything. It's like
Yeah. How does that look? What does that look like?
it looks like, is the way that we're relating our day-to-day dynamic, like, is that working for you? Is it working for me? What can we change? How do we want to feel? What do we want to feel more of on a day-to-day basis? It looks like, how are the finances going? And, is there anything that needs to be adjusted? Anybody needs to make a contribution? Do we need to, you know, settle anything?
Hmm.
It looks like, what are the to-dos and how is that being split? And are we on time with the specific to-dos that have deadlines? And so it very much is like, it
All the
operates like a
things.
company, but, and it can feel, I feel like Europeans probably listen to this and they're like, oh, Americans are so, but I think it's really important for you. If you have a very busy life and
Yeah.
you have kids and you have aging parents and all the things that happen
Yes.
with life, you need to have a structured approach with your partner, or else too much resentment is going to build. And then you also need to have activities for yourself. Like, I cannot stress this enough. Have your hobby, have your
Your own
girlfriends or
things.
your guy friends. And yes, like, you want to be an interesting person for yourself. And you also need that time to breathe so that you come back into the relationship and you're like, okay, I took care of myself. I show up differently.
One of the biggest things I now ask people I'm going out with, like first, second date, is who are your close friends? What are they like? And like, how often do you see them? Because I did start to realize that there was something to be said about I myself am really fortunate. And maybe it's a female male dynamic, but I definitely myself am very fortunate. I have some incredible girlfriends and male friends. I have very good friends. I am beyond blessed with my friendships and my
Yeah.
communities. And I realized that I needed a partner in the future who has their own friendships.
Yeah.
I don't need to be friends with every one of your friends, and you don't need to be friends with every one of my friends. We'll have overlap, but you need your own friendships, you need your own hobbies, you need your own people. I feel like also as couples get older and they move places, it's very easy, I feel like, for women to make friends in new cities and
Yeah.
new communities. And it seems like it's harder for men unless you, pick up a sport or do something. But it seems to be harder for men to find these new friends. Do you see that at all in terms of like movement or marriage or
Female friendships are absolutely beautiful. Like
yeah.
it's so hard to explain how deep our friendships are.
Mhm.
And men, unfortunately, because of the way that they're socialized to have to be very strong and independent providers, and really they're only allowed to show emotions in sex and in sports and at work. And so you have these limitations as to how they really express themselves. And I think that's a huge detriment to their friendships. I I mean, I was hearing this on Amy Poehler's Good Hank podcast. Like, when you ask, research has shown that when you ask men who their best friends are, they will consistently say it's their wives, and the wives always have their girlfriends.
Yeah, they're like, "Well, here's my list."
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so you have to make a really concerted effort to, what is your hobby? Get engaged in that, meet people that
Mhm.
are, practicing your hobby, engaging in it, and you have to be a protagonist, like
Mhm.
reach out to people, schedule the meetups, like consistently show up. That's I mean, it's at the core of building community, but that would be my advice. Guys need the guys night out. Like it's so important. Women need the girls night. Like
Yeah.
it just feeds so much of relationship health.
Okay, so let's talk about finances for a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the things that I know you and I talked about when we first met was how, financial resentment and then also financial imbalances. The world has just changed so much in the past few years. And I'm a big advocate for, female entrepreneurs. I've invested in other female entrepreneurs. It's my
Yeah.
favorite thing to do. And I love seeing women succeed and become powerful. But there is something to be said about this. Like, it's a new world and a new balance, especially in the bedroom, right? Because
Yeah.
historically it was men that were making more money and providing and quote unquote taking care of financially
Yeah.
in a relationship. And now the dynamic has changed and a lot of women are making just as much as their partner, if not more.
Right.
And it's bleeding into the bedroom for
Yeah.
better or worse, understanding these kind of dynamics of power at play. What are you seeing out there and how can I would say progressive couples deal with this in a good way?
Yeah. It's so funny. There's this statistic that women who make more money than men fake their orgasms more because they want to protect the man's ego.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. So it's it's a very fine line, I think, because men feel threatened or they can feel threatened, or even when they're not threatened, then the woman is resentful. And
Mhm.
you really need to like lay it out in the open. How much are you guys making today? I actually had a whole interview today with The Guardian about this. Like, how much are you guys making today? What do you have saved? Is there any family inheritance? Like, based on that, how are you going to split the bills so that you make this equal? Like, so it feels
Mhm.
aligned for everybody involved. And based off of that, what are you going to do in a worst case scenario where somebody loses their job, where their income decreases, things happen.
Yeah.
And so, how are you going to navigate that? Like, what are the things that you're going to put in place so that this doesn't become an unnecessary or surprising stressor in the relationship?
Yes.
And how do you feel about how much I make and how much you and our careers? I honestly like, for me, what I hear a lot from men is this resentment that like the women who work a lot and who tend to make more money,
Mhm.
they don't have enough time to give attention to the men. And this is
Totally.
like frankly a universal thing, which
Yes.
it happens when, women have kids, but you notice that too when they work long hours, and men just really, really resent that more than I'd say women do if, men are working long hours and they're not.
Do you think that also though goes back a lot to like the fact that women, we get attention from friends and community in other areas where men, a
Yeah.
lot of men only get attention from their partner and or the
Yeah.
people they work with.
Yeah.
And so then, the statistic I forgot, I just saw it on a pod recently about how many, affairs happen in the workplace. And usually
Oh,
it's
so calm. But I also think that like the affairs in the workplace is that you're seeing the person at their best, like
yeah,
highest energy, executing if they're good at what they do.
totally.
It's super sexy to see them in their element. And then you come home and you give your partner your leftovers, like your low
Mhm.
energy, you don't even want to talk. And so it's very easy for you to be attracted to somebody at work in that context.
It is so true. Yeah, you could
Yeah.
be thriving at work and be like the person that's
Yeah.
crushing it, and then you go home and you're not, you're drowning.
Exactly. Esther Perel has a good advice that she gives couples. It's probably not practical for a lot of people, but your dates should be scheduled as lunches instead of dinners with your partner because
Huh.
during the workday is when you have your highest energy. And so you're going to show up, with energy. That wouldn't work for me because I like to have my wine and I do enjoy nighttime, but this could be a really good hack, so to speak, for a lot of couples.
Yeah, or maybe there's also something to be said about seeing your partner in their working environment to be like,
Yeah.
"Wow, that's
Yeah.
hot."
That's
Like,
hot.
you're crushing it.
Yeah, because if you ask people like when are you the most attracted to your partner, one of the, common answers is seeing them in their element,
Mhm.
whether that is at work, giving a presentation, a speech, or sometimes it's parenting, like,
Yeah. Sports,
yeah,
whatever it
sports.
is,
Yeah.
wherever they excel.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you see a lot of couples post, first do you have a lot of clients that are post first marriage, or is it mostly couples that are still together?
No, they're still together from their first marriage.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And they're seeking you out.
They're seeking me
I
out.
love
Yeah.
this. I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that more people, becoming more attuned to this and open and receptive to having a sexologist, having a
Yeah.
therapist. All this is going to help strengthen marriages, having a financial planner, because I think it
Yeah.
is really all tied in at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Do you, from just we're really lucky, right? Because we live in Manhattan and our networks, I think, are pretty progressive. But I will say there's probably, like I said, a large amount of people who don't necessarily have access to a sexologist or someone remote or, don't want to do something
Yeah.
remote. What are some resources that you can recommend to an individual who's just trying to like dip their toe into this and see what resources are out there, or if there's a book that they should be reading, or if there's, another podcast that they should be listening to around sex and to kind of help strengthen their own relationships, or if there's, whatever it might be, like what would be like one or two things you would say, hey, go read this or go listen to this.
Come as You Are by Dr. Emily Nagoski,
Yeah.
for sure. Becoming Cliterate by Dr. Lori Mintz. I would also recommend the Sex and Psychology podcast by Dr. Justin Lee Miller. He's a phenomenal sex researcher at the Kinsey Institute, and he has a great book on sexual fantasies.
Cool.
He did so much research on it, and I think it can really open up people's minds. I often speak to women who are like, I've never had a fantasy. I'm like, a fantasy, you don't need to be hanging down from the chandeliers. Like, it can be just having 8 hours of sleep and
Yeah.
restful sex and your partner kissing you slowly on your neck. And, it's like that is a fantasy too. It's like
Yeah.
whatever turns you on. But I think reading about what other people experience will open up your mind a lot, and that's just really beautiful. And if you want to, consistently time and time again, like if you are consuming content around this specific topic, you will stimulate your imagination more and you will be more turned on the regular, so to speak.
Yeah.
So audio erotica is really great. Apps like Dipsy and Quinn, as well as like literary erotica.
Amazing.
So Gillian Anderson wrote a book called Want. She actually compiled a bunch of different sexual fantasies from women around the world.
One.
And yeah, and it's a phenomenal book.
Okay.
And a good read for somebody who's like, I don't know if I want to read smut, but
Yeah.
this is other people sharing their experiences. So I mean, I love it. Sheer Height is, I mean, I rave about her, but she's a sexologist from the 70s.
Amazing.
And she wrote, the Height Report on
Oh,
female
geez.
sexuality, on male sexuality, on like women in love. And it also shares stories from other people. So, like, start reading what other people are experiencing and how this impacts you.
Okay.
And as a couple, if you haven't connected in a really
Yeah.
long time sexually, there's a really great book called So Tell Me About the Last Time You Had Sex. And it's by Dr. Ian Kerner,
Very
therapist.
easy title to remember.
Yes, yes. And he has so many different frameworks and exercises in it. So yeah, I mean, there's a world of wealth out there.
So usually I'm the one giving presents, but today I'm the one getting presents.
Yes.
Okay. So tell me what is in here.
So this is my intimacy card deck that helps couples talk about sex.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I want to open this later, but I'm so excited. So tell me, they're just
So it has 2 levels of 69 cards each. The first level is more romantic. It's for you to really like ease into the subject so you don't feel like
like,
yeah.
oh my gosh.
Yeah. And the second level is more, sexual. You really dive into spicier questions. And the beauty is that it's the card that asks the question, not you. So it takes that pressure off of your back. And if there's any card that you don't enjoy, you can just set it aside because there's 138 cards and like most
Also, this
likely.
imagery is gorgeous.
Yes, I partnered with a Brazilian artist who did erotic artwork for
I
it. I
love
really wanted it
this.
to be something that sits on your coffee table. So
What's going on?
yeah,
I love it.
yes. And then this is just another brand that launched and they sent me a bunch of great goodies and it's
Scents,
called Sense and
condoms.
they have just very beautiful graphic design and
This is great.
so a condom can go along with it.
You know what I love is that it's not some cheesy, like bright silver.
Exactly. And that's for you to carry your condoms in because you shouldn't carry them in your wallet.
Oh my gosh, wait, it's literally a condom carrier.
It is a condom
It's like a
carrier.
bougie
Yeah.
condom carrier.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is really funny branding,
Yeah.
but also strategic branding.
Yes.
I
Yes.
love this. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having
Yes.
me.
I'm so happy.
Me
I'm
too.
so